I'm actually really excited to have this conversation because this is something that I think I've seen like for as long as I've been in remodeling and construction. Where there's this phenomenon, and there's this project is a super good example, where there's this phenomenon of people don't understand what things cost. And the people that they go to advise them are not the right people to advise them on cost. And so, like, frankly, we just end up with an incredible waste and so many projects that don't actually ever get built.
Yeah, I mean, just totally unrelated. Not 30 minutes ago, I was meeting with a couple that wanted to remodel their basement. They talked to a designer. The designer told them it would be way better if they added a second story. They hired that designer and an architect to develop this second story addition. By the time they got an engineer involved, they started to get a sense of the cost of it. They're almost a year in, $10,000 spent, only to learn none of it's feasible for them. And so now they're here talking to me about remodeling the basement.
No, but it's not feasible because of cost, or
because of cost.
Not?
They spent all this time and money to learn. They can't afford doing that.
Wow.
And so over a year and $10,000+ later, they're back to square one, trying to find someone to help them remodel their basement.
The absurd thing to me, though, is like, this isn't like a rare story.
We see it every week.
Yeah. And I've seen this, like, we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about the difference between the kind of traditional approach in design build, but I've seen this happen in both. So can you maybe summarize for us, like, what is the traditional, like, construction approach that's not traditional, it's like been around for 100 years, and what does design build look like?
And it almost sounds logical, right? You know, the traditional logical approach is you work with a designer or architect, and you develop a basic plan set. You get it all on paper, and then you've got this really easy thing to hand out to a bunch of contractors and have you get bids. And then you can feel, hopefully, confident that they're bidding this plan set the same. And then you can say, well, how did I like this person and what was their cost? And how did I like this person and what was their cost? And it's easy. Then you can just decide who you want to work with and you do the project. That's how on paper it goes.
Yeah.
But what we find is that everybody that is trying to bid this plan set interprets it differently. And while this plan set's got a lot of detail, it's also lacking a lot of details. And so anybody that's trying to write a bid to build this project has to decide whether or not to include a certain amount of information to make up for the lack of information that's in here, and or just exclude it. And then you got a nice low number that you can go in and just let them know that you will add that once you figure it out, which is just an open-ended amount, right? But that's more or less the way I see people going about trying to understand how to do, in this case, an addition.
And so contrast that, like, what is a design build approach done correctly?
Well, done correctly, you're going to have a detailed conversation about what it is we're trying to achieve, right? Like, do we need another bedroom and a bathroom? Do we need a place to send the kids to go play? Are we trying to get a place to do a hobby, a workshop or something like that? Right? We want to understand, what is it that we really hope to achieve? And then we want to also look closely at the options, the space, and we want to start to figure out, like, what are the different ways you might achieve that. Do you build up? Do you build out? Do you repurpose something? And then really importantly, you discuss what kind of money are we working with? Do we have unlimited funds? I mean, that'd be nice. Most of the people I've always talked to have a limited amount of money that they can invest into this project. And so you have to balance all of those things together as you start to realize if it's feasible or not.
Yeah.
And so you can do an awful lot of that work before spending a whole lot of money. Oftentimes before spending much money at all.
Yeah.
And then as you figure out really what's the approach you want to take with achieving those goals, you really need to keep that in mind as you move in through designing and developing the project to avoid scope creep and to avoid making costly mistakes, so that you can develop a plan set that you can afford to build, that is well informed and you're allowed to build permits engineering wise and all of those things. And if you strike the right balance, it can actually be a lot of fun to create this new space that you're going to create, build it for the amount of money that you expected to spend, and it actually happened in the timeline that you planned on.
Yeah.
That's a successful design build story.
Yeah, I think back to quite a few different projects over the years where they even tried to get us involved later in the process, where we already have some plans, already have some engineering. There was one project where they knew up front that they had some tight budget constraints, and they had this outbuilding, this garage that was constructed of cinder block in, I think it was in the Irvington district in Portland. And they knew that if they were to demo the whole building, they would have planning restrictions and it'd really increase the cost. So we're trying to come up with a way to do this ADU to keep most of the existing structure. And so they went this really, and the architect's super nice guy, good guy, but they pulled in a structural engineer and made this really complicated approach of like underpinning the existing concrete cinder block walls to stabilize everything. And then, but when we actually got involved to like start putting some real numbers together, you know, all the structural stability and everything, and the fact, you know, nobody on the design team had actually really looked at the site as a whole to determine like how we're actually going to do this, and the fact that this property is like 4 feet above all the other properties and there's this retaining wall, like it just ballooned way out of control because of the practical limitations and things that were going to happen as part of the building process that, you know, you can't really expect your architect or your engineer to really figure out.
Yeah, you need to bring a team to the table, right? You need a project manager that can talk about site conditions and influence on whether or not underpinning is even an option, right? If you're going to excavate out a huge amount of the property, a lot of people don't realize how far you have to dig back depending on how far you're digging down. You know, putting plans on paper looks great, seems like it should be straightforward, but site conditions are a whole nother challenge that need to be involved in that whole entire process.
And it's a kind of thing where, like, with the traditional approach, done right, it can actually look a lot like the design build approach. But the way I've seen it done most of the time, the architect or the owner will try to do that. They will bring the team together in the beginning. They'll get the contractor in the same room and they'll talk about like, hey guys, this is the budget we want. Contractor, you know, we're waving our hands, pointing at things. Like, is that going to be somewhere around where we want it to be? You're good. Okay, good. Or come look at this and give us a rough, you know, idea so we can go finish, you know, working on plans. But they're not like actually on the team. They're like, just show up for a meeting to give free advice for a half an hour. And so the quality of the advice is what you'd expect for free advice for half an hour. It's not awesome. And so then the owner or the architect makes decisions that then take the project down a way that like costs a certain amount of money that normally is not in the budget.
Yeah, well, in my experience, I've met a lot of folks that in the early stages you don't want to limit your creativity, right? You don't want to limit yourself. And so it's encouraged to say, hey, let's figure this out. Like, let's take money out of the equation. Let's figure out what we want. And if we need to dial it back later, we can. But that right there, that starting with this, like, shoot for the stars, while again, that sounds great. You're setting yourself up for starting to fall in love with this idea that you're never going to have. And so quickly the confusion comes in of, okay, well, what are we going to take out? And as you're trying to develop it, you're figuring out, like, can I get a bid on this versus, like, and then change this and change that, and pretty soon that plan that's on paper is no longer on paper, because you're already starting to realize that maybe you didn't need to, design and build all this stuff into this plan set. And so, it can get really hairy really quickly if you don't have a real like game plan on keeping all of these components of the project balanced from the start.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into this particular project. So what we've got here is we've got a big addition that we're just started working on the designs for.
Yep.
But it was one of these stories. It was exactly this story. And the client was super generous just to even allow us to have this discussion and share the different bids he's gotten, so that we can have even more to talk about here. And I think that's important to think about even with this example, because one of the main arguments for this traditional approach, which I say traditional, and that the sidebar on that is traditional only since like the late 19th century, whereas prior to that, it was really a design builder approach, a master builder approach, where you had one guy or one group who was responsible for the design and the execution. And I feel very strongly that this divorce between the two has really hurt construction in general throughout the entire world. But like, because of this divorce, you have, like, there's lots of other reasons, but like, that really fuels production builders who don't care much about the design. They literally want to build it as quickly and cheaply as possible and sell it. And so that divorce causes builders and contractors and carpenters to care a whole lot less about the design and the art. I think it just takes more effort and more work to like get construction improvements and things done. So anyway, back to this project though. The argument for the traditional approach is really that I don't know what this is going to cost as an owner, and I want to make sure I'm getting the best price. So I'm going to get a drawing, so I have a basic scope. We're going to define the scope that way, and then I'm going to send it out to bid, and then I'm going to get the best price possible to build this project. I think that's the main argument I've heard for that approach. Would you say that's fair?
Totally fair, and that's exactly what happened here. In this case, the client met with an architect that talked to him about this 1920s beautiful Portland home. He really pressed this client to really follow through with the character of the home, and included all kinds of custom built-ins that, I mean, I can't argue with that. They're sure, it's beautiful. They also went ahead and added rooms that maybe they didn't need, but like, why wouldn't you add another bathroom? All you got to do is just add a dormer addition, and then you can have a whole nother bathroom upstairs. And so, as they developed this plan, they shot for the stars, and they put together what, if this client could afford to build everything that was put into this, I'm sure it would be a spectacular project.
Yeah.
The problem is he didn't have a couple $100,000 extra to add a the bathroom and the dormer addition and make a bunch of other modifications to the existing structure that had nothing to do with the addition of a primary bedroom and bathroom, which is the overall goal, right? What they needed was a primary bedroom and bathroom and a minor reconfiguration of the stairs so that they could move through the space more efficiently and easily. At the end of the day, this plan set did a whole lot more than that. And so he and she went down what has been a long journey of trying to get pricing for this plan set and tried to compare this proposal versus this proposal versus this proposal, and what a journey they went on.
But talk to me about that. Like what, you know, I kind of see the argument for like, let's explore all the options because we don't know what any of this stuff costs. And it's really sometimes by like taking the constraints off and letting people think outside the box that you come up with really cool ideas. So talk to me about that journey and like maybe how they feel about the journey today.
Yeah. Well, today the journey, while maybe it was exciting at the front end, became very frustrating and quite costly.
Sure.
You know, the initial plan set got developed, and there was many thousands of dollars spent in architectural professional hours to develop this thing. And this particular architect really likes, it's this one, this particular contractor.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, it's this one. And, you know, to a large degree, they gave it to him, said, what's it going to cost? And they came back with a huge number that was not realistic for them to be able to do this. But this is also a premier builder in this area. They do beautiful work. And I should also note that while the architect has put a lot of detail in this addition and other modifications to the house, no engineering's been done.
Yeah.
So there's no selections. They didn't actually choose the flooring type and the window type, and there's a lot of other stuff that needs to come into this. So this is their best guess, and as they told him, this is the starting point of what it's going to cost. And he knew they were going to, for lack of a better way of describing it, the Cadillac of contractors, right?
Yeah.
So he thought, well, shoot, let me talk to more of a mom and pop, you know, builder that's been around for over a decade. They have a good reputation, but they definitely aren't fancy. Like they don't.
So the one that the architect liked to use before was the fancier one.
Totally.
We've got 3 proposals here, and the fancier one is about 10 years old. And I looked up some other stats on them to kind of get a judge from the internet, like what does it look like with their reputation. So this one is about 10 years old, has only 6 online reviews. So that surprised me, given they've been around for a while. Architect really loves them. And so they were the premier builder.
Right.
And so then the client went and hired kind of a mom and pop builder.
Yeah, I went and talked to these folks.
Okay.
And they also do some custom home construction, a lot of remodeling. And they put together a similar package as far as the estimate. And the pricing that they provided was similar to the first one.
Okay.
So he thought, oh, wow, I'm a little surprised that it's not significantly less.
Yeah.
Is what he told me anyway. Because he thought that, you know, this first bid that he got was going to set the bar here. His hopes were that if he went with somebody like this, it was going to come down a good bit. And it didn't.
And so these guys, they've been around since the early 90s. And so let's actually, what were the numbers? These guys came in.
Well, they provided a single number that they said, this is where it's going to be a minimum. And it's going to go up from here as we develop the engineering and really add the details. So that one came in at $483,000.
Okay.
These guys provided more of a budget range that they thought that the project could be completed within. And that was a range of $389,000 to $492,000. So just a little range.
Yeah.
And then he thought, man, I should talk to a general contractor that knows his stuff.
Yeah.
But doesn't have a showroom, doesn't have any fancy overhead that he has to deal with. Really just a salt of the earth guy that he had some amount of trust in, has a good reputation. Yeah. So that's where this proposal came from. And as you dive into this one, this one is really tricky for me to read because you've got all these fixed costs and allowances and build and estimated. It's a little harder, but if you just go to the last page highlighted here, he's got this project costing $456,000. So not significantly different. It lands within this range and only $25,000 less than the premier builder.
And so just so I understand where we're at in the process, right? We have no engineering. We have architectural drawings, like preliminary drawings. We're going out to bid, and so we've gotten 3 different numbers. But none of these numbers we can sign a contract today and build a project for.
They all need a significant amount of additional work to get to the point where you have a plan set that's ready for permits.
Okay. So this one looks like this guy is even maybe a cost plus contractor. It says this is not a contract. Numbers are given or estimates. So. Yeah, it looks like this may be a cost plus kind of contractor. He says some items are fixed. This one...
They are a fixed cost.
They're fixed price.
So they said, here's this range that we think it'll be in. We'll work together. You'll spend a chunk of money to get this plan set ready for permits. And at that point, we'll tell you what it's going to cost.
Okay. And that's a massive range. That's like $390,000 to $492,000.
Yeah, $100,000, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Is that like a acknowledgement that there's enough to figure out in the plans that we could be anywhere in there?
I would think so. To take a plan set like this and give a number to the 66 cents, it really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Sure.
The reality is to communicate about this with any accuracy right now is to say, hey, there's a lot of work to be done to figure out what it's going to cost. And I think it's most appropriate at this stage to give a range.
Yeah, that makes sense. But part of the reason that somebody, and it sounds like this gentleman, wanted to go about the process this way was so that he could make sure he's working with somebody who's giving him a good price.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure company A versus company B versus company C wasn't either significantly overestimating or underestimating. He had no idea what this was going to take.
Yeah.
And so he spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time, and now he's got a decision to make, which is, I got 3 competing bids to build this plan set. All of them are way too much money for me right now. And so I've got to figure out, what am I going to do next, right? Do I keep spending money with this architect and start to deconstruct the plan set and make it simpler or smaller, and then go back to these people, and these people, and continue to have these conversations or like they were definitely at a point where they weren't really sure, right? Because the decision they were supposed to be able to decide, and away they go.
But even looking at these, they can't even really, they definitely don't know who's going to give them the best price, because each one of these, like this one on the front says this rough order of magnitude provides an estimated project construction cost. Like when somebody says rough order of magnitude, that makes me say, like that's a big wide range. Like we don't really know what this costs. Like, a rough order of magnitude for, buying some skis is like maybe $200 to like $3,000, right?
Yeah.
Depends on what kind of skis you want and, what your priorities are and what you want to spend. So like, that doesn't give me any confidence in this. This, I've got a $100,000 range. I have no idea where we're at there. This one kind of almost feels like I've got, maybe more confidence in it, but because it only gives me one number. Line items out a lot of stuff, but it also says very clear at the bottom, like this is not a contract. So like it looks pretty good and clear, but based on these, like, and where we're at in the project, like I don't feel like I could choose, where I'm going to get the best price.
And that's why this particular client didn't move forward with any of these three, right? They found that this traditional approach of get a plan set and get some bids and then pick one and away you go, it's not working out for them.
Yeah.
And so with that, they came to us and they said, hey, we're just collecting bids. We don't know what to do. Here's a plan set. Do you want to give us a bid? Right? Do you know anybody else that'll give us a bid? And anybody that's bidding this plan set is going to have to put in a significant amount of work to give a bid. And so the secondary part of this is like, once you've put in 3-4 hours of doing takeoff work and populating all of the information that you gather, you try to present all this information to the client as clearly as you can, and you describe all the steps that are involved. But then when you go to follow up with the client, and they say, "Hey, I know you put together this very elaborate estimate for my project, but can you go back into that estimate now? Because we don't want to do everything as it's designed, and I don't want to pay the architect a lot of money to redraw this up, but we need to reduce the cost of this project. So can you just remove certain aspects from this drawing? Maybe we don't need that dormer in that bathroom anymore. Maybe we don't need the wall that was a load-bearing wall that needs engineering to put a beam in, and we'll just leave that as 2 separate rooms." And a lot of that custom cabinetry and built-in that was going to go in different places, like we know that starts to add up. So take all that stuff out, and then tell me what it cost.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what they started to do.
Okay. So they went back to everybody that they had things bid out and said, okay, actually, we can't afford any of this stuff.
Yeah.
We need you to, like, just in your bid, take out, like, this handful of things.
Yeah. And some of them said, that sounds like a lot of work. And more or less said, you'll need to start paying us.
Yeah.
To really, continue to work on this. We've already invested probably 5, 6, 7 hours in creating your first bid, and we'd love to work with you, but at some point, you need to give us some money so that we can continue to work on this thing.
Yeah.
Others said, sure, how about just take $60K off of the bid I gave you? Just that's what you told me to take out. $60K sounds about right.
All right.
So take that out, and that's your new bid, right? So
Okay.
they got a mixed bag of feedback as they tried to continue to compare, like, what is it going to cost to build this thing? And really quickly, if they forgot to mention one of those things to one of these others, like, you're not comparing apples to apples anymore.
Right.
So the orange entered the equation. And now, yeah.
But with these estimates, like, I know an architect she's amazing, and she published a really actually excellent guide on how to compare bids with the exact process that she uses. And she's been a general contractor, she's now an architect, and you can't even do that with these, because the only way you can actually compare them is if everything is coded in standardized construction cost codes, and you can literally make a spreadsheet with a cost code and each dude's cost that they give you in the same format. But like, we can't do that here. And with the ballpark for like pull 60K out and all the disclaimers all over the place, like, we know these aren't not real numbers, right?
No. Yeah, we're just, more or less hoping that they're accurate.
And these guys are saying, well, you're gonna have to give us more money to get to the point where we're giving you like more numbers. So in order to actually get to the point where you can compare all the bids, it sounds like you're gonna have to pay at least a couple of the contractors to revise their bids. You're gonna have to actually do the engineering, pay the engineer, and then you have to pay the architect to finish the drawings. And at this point, that sounds expensive.
Yeah, very.
So, like, how did they actually make a decision in this real scenario, like, what to do next?
Yeah, I mean, to a large degree, when I got involved with this client, we sat down and we started to really evaluate this plan set and talk about what's most important.
Okay.
And it was funny because this plan set really is a whole house remodel. And he said, we're trying to add a primary bedroom with bathroom. And because of the age of this home, we can't add it on top of the home. And so the original architect had what was a unique and fun idea of doing a second story addition that's up in the air that's attached to the back of the home.
Yeah.
And then to be able to get into this new primary bedroom, we're going to have to take out the internal staircase and open up what was an office, and then create a new staircase that connects the basement, the main floor, and the second story to the addition. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, that all makes sense, and this is a great concept that he's developed here, and we can definitely do that. And so if that's your number one goal, that's what we're really trying to accomplish here, let's talk about what accomplishing that goal costs. And so because this is an older home in Portland and it's got certain types of siding and trim and a lot of the decisions for the aesthetics have already been decided for us. So from a budgeting standpoint, I'm able to more or less match existing on a lot of those things. And we're doing that on the interior as well. I was able to run a budget to say, hey, this is what you're trying to achieve cost.
Yeah.
And so all this other stuff, you can do that now or later or never, right? But the goal that your family is trying to achieve can achieve that goal for X amount of dollars. And there's a lot of work still to be done to get to a plan set that's ready for permits.
Yeah.
But adding all this other stuff just gave us a lot of unnecessary information. And so ultimately what we've decided to do is zero in on accomplishing the goal and value engineering this existing concept so that we can get that cost into alignment with what they can afford.
So in essence, it sounds like you almost like didn't just jump into the traditional process he had rolling. You kind of said, let's take a step back because you got new information, or you got the information that you can't afford this like big dream plan, and let's take a different approach. Let's figure out what really is going to, change your life in the way you need it changed. Let's figure out what that's going to cost, and then whatever else we could add on that might be bonus, you could add on.
Yeah.
And so that way you didn't have to go through like a big redesign process, and it set it better where he knew what he was going to be able to afford.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, I would say that the work that this architect's done isn't wasted. He came up with a great concept that just needs a lot more work. And the reality is that it needs more work on achieving the goals of the client and not achieving the goals of the architect.
Sure.
The architect, he had probably had a lot of fun coming up with placing built-in storage options and cabinets and the details that, and I can't say that it was a bad idea for him to honor the character of this home. It just got carried way beyond the needs of this client.
Yeah.
And so, what we're in the process of doing now is putting together a plan set that's going to have all of the details necessary to do this addition, to get the engineering done, and we know that we're able to achieve this in a budget that the client's comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so as we get to where we are putting in the final details, we'll have some design meetings where we'll be able to say, hey, we budgeted for a simple railing around this deck that's underneath the addition. If you wanted to spend a little more, you could change this to this other really fancy one that would be great, or you can keep the project at this lower cost.
Yeah.
And we're providing options along the way, but all the while, the budget is very much important because we know we can't go over what they have to spend.
Right.
And so decisions are being made based on knowing what we can actually do or not here.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like you're just doing it the same way I like to buy. Like lots of stuff is just understand what the base price is for this, car or guitar or whatever it is. So I know I can at least afford it. And then if I want heated seats and all this other stuff, I can do that.
Totally.
If I have more money. But you're not just designing, the most amazing truck that can fly and everything. And, I'm stuck with this, amazing vision that then we have to like take out all the things that I like.
Yeah, exactly. We're not starting in the fanciest sports car you've ever been in and then saying, all right, you want to buy this? Well, I guess we could go drive that little thing. I mean, we're starting with pricing out and figuring out what's the goal. Let's figure that out. Is it achievable?
Yeah.
Turns out the goal is very achievable.
That's great.
And can we grow that a little bit and add a couple of other whistles and bells while we're at it? I'm sure there's going to be some nice things that get added onto this.
Yeah.
And can they do some of these other things that got thrown into this project in the future? Sure. Like there's nothing that we're doing now that stops, these other things from happening. But this size of a project not being unnecessary, we haven't even talked about the challenge of they have to move out.
Yeah.
And they're going to be out of their home for a really long time. Where now that we've kind of zeroed it back in to achieving the goals, they're not going to be out for very long.
Yeah.
It's totally doable, and the amount of kind of pain and time is much more manageable now.
Yeah. So really it sounds like, they've gone through this process with an architect where they're, having to redesign some stuff, but it's not all wasted. And you're able to come in and help them understand like how to reduce the scope, and to execute it in a budget that they really can afford.
Yeah, definitely. The architect essentially said, best of luck to you. And he is no longer working on this plan set or doing anything. We are able to adapt this concept, but we're going to go ahead and start to value engineer it.
Yeah.
Make sure that we design and finalize this plan set with a project that is within their budget.
Yeah.
And achieves all of their goals. And then we'll be able to fully execute the project on time, on budget.
And, I will point out, I didn't say it until now, I don't know if you put this in the podcast thing, but I find it interesting, like these guys, their design build, they're going to redesign the drawings. This guy, probably not. There's no design in here. These guys, the high-end firm that the architect loves, like, they have a nice website, but they also have, 6 times the CCB complaints of anybody else here. And, how many reviews? 6 online reviews. So, everybody has at least one CCB complaint that's involved in this, okay? Which is not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
You can't control all the crazy people. But this guy's got 6. It feels like a pattern. He's the youngest company, and there's only 6 online reviews. It feels to me like, I don't know this architect's experience in doing this, and I don't want to make this podcast like a slam on architects, but it feels like I don't know if the guidance he's getting from the architect is the best.
No. Hey, now that you've given me a whole bunch of money, come work with this guy that everybody, or a lot of folks have had a really hard time with.
Yeah, but I mean, and I've heard architects over the years complain a lot about the contractors that they work with. Sometimes they do find a really good mesh, but especially in residential remodel, which is super small and niche in what a lot of architects do, I feel like because of the way this is structured, and they draw something big and amazing that they can't afford, then they bid it out. Sometimes the homeowner is pressured to choose the lowest possible cost provider, and so the contractor that actually builds the project is not the best contractor. And so, but that's because of the way that you're going about it, is design something that's amazing and then find the lowest cost provider to try to execute it.
Yeah.
Or at least the guy who says it's lowest cost, because none of these are even actually contracts.
And then you're right into that really, really challenging process of becoming pot committed, because you're in the middle of the build. Yeah. You thought it was only going to cost a certain amount of money. The person that was trying to put this bid together realized, man, I did not charge enough. And then starts the real stress, the either swapping things out that aren't in the plan
That's
set
where you
try
get
to bring the cost down, and or a lot of expensive change orders, and you wonder what is it actually going to cost, and nothing good comes out of any of that.
Or even the actual conflict between the builder and the architect in construction, where I had an architect who's a friend of mine, design this great addition space, and he was pissed after the project at the builder, because probably this exact scenario, right? Builder, I don't know if they're cost plus or not, but homeowner and builder are running out of money, and we gotta save some costs. So the builder switches out this nice window on the front of this garage for just a louvered vent that goes into the attic, that looks terrible on the exterior of the building, saved $200.
Yeah.
And the architect is pulling out his hair, and I understand why. He saved $200 and it looks stupid now, but it's partly because of the incentives and the fact that you're creating a situation that creates price pressure on the client and the contractor, depending on who's actually, what the contractual relationship is. Yeah. And it creates problems instead of just starting with a good budget.
Yeah, absolutely.